idea of the treatment we're giving to the COVID-19 story.
So today, like you're saying, we're literally starting off the week post the relaxation into level 4. In Cape Town, RT is at a committee meeting where they're going to be talking. Remember that fence?
Yes.
On Bait Bridge.
Yes, Bait Bridge.
The one that cost us millions and millions of rand.
Right.
The one that people were making a joke of, right? Mm-hmm. So the Minister of Public Works is going to talk about that fence and why we spent so much money on it and whether it was a hasty job and you know, all the things that, the questions that people are asking, she will be able to explain this morning. But they're also talking about the quarantine centers that the Public Works Department is supposed to give us. So where are these places? How equipped are they? Are they ready? And all of that, since now we're going into level 4 of lockdown. So that's what's happening in Parliament this morning. Yeah. We're following that. And then we're following Minister Lindiwe Zulu, Social Development Minister. Yeah. Remember that grants are now going to be dispersed from today. So that 350 that the President spoke about and the Minister was at length trying to explain last week is happening today. So she's at one of the pay points monitoring how the system is going. There was a lot of talk about how that is going to happen, how do people get access to it, and she'll give us more information about how they were able to get people on their database, how they vetted those people, and how the process will be unfolding this morning. So that's where we're following. We're also going to the Gautrain station. Remember, they're now starting again with operations this morning. So we're monitoring how well that is happening, how people are behaving on the Gautrain. Last week, the Department of Transport spoke about spacing people out in the train so as to give them space and to keep them safe, right? So Linda's going on a Gautrain to Hatfield to check how that is going to pan out. And then, of course, we monitor the 1.9 million people that are going back to work today. Yeah. And our focus really is how are they getting to work? If you're using public transport, how are you getting to work? Are taxis or public transport adhering to that 70% in the taxi situation? So we're also going to different malls, to different places to check whether everybody is adhering to the regulations there.
You speak about the malls, and you know, I also just remember the fact that Jabulani Mall is, I guess, another one in Soweto that's been added to the list of very bustling areas that is now registered. I think it was 2 COVID-19 cases?
It was. So it's one of the stories that we're following on the desk, really, to find out. From what I understand, 2 employees of a Food Lovers at Jabulani may have tested positive yesterday, and we're getting a confirmation from the Department of Health later today. But that, again, that brings COVID-19 closer to our community. So it's one story that we will definitely give you feedback on in terms of how far they are with those people and whether, I know that the place is closed today, and what other things and how they're testing in other shops and other parts of the mall. That's one of the stories that we'll be following on our desk.
Right, and I'm sure by this stage a lot of people are already starting to make their way home, to work, I beg your pardon. So the economy, of course, as you know, will see quite a boost as activity again resumes, with around 1.5 million people said to be returning to work as lockdown restrictions ease. Now, the majority of those returning to work use public transport in order to reach their workplaces. Our reporter, Itakani Magwetse, is tracking this aspect of the story for us. He's at the Bree taxi rank and joins us live to give us an idea of some of the movement that's taking place there at the moment. Itakani, I imagine it's a busier than usual morning, at least considering the last 5 weeks. Paint the picture for us and locate to us what the activity is looking like at this hour.
Ayanda, it's certainly a different Bree taxi rank to what we saw on the first day of the official lockdown here in Johannesburg. The first day we came here after lockdown officially was, of course, also a Monday, coincidentally. And what we saw here was a lot less numbers in terms of taxis and commuters. What you see right now is a higher number of people gathered around here, but apart from the number of people, you see a lot of them are wearing masks, including the taxi drivers, which is something that we didn't see initially. There are a lot more taxi drivers that have masks on, and as you can see, there are a lot more people who have been positions in the middle of the entrance to ensure that the taxis that go out are checked in terms of the number of people who are supposed to be in there. We know that there's supposed to be a number of 70% of capacity in terms of the people that are in the taxis. The gentleman there is from the association that deals with this breed taxi rank, and that's the kind of security and assurance that they're giving to ensure that the taxis are checked. And in fact, you have people going around to every taxi and sanitizing the commuters and the drivers. So there's a lot more effort from the taxi industry seemingly on level 4 to ensure that there is compliance to the regulations. But also, we spoke to some of the association's officials. They're saying that they're experiencing a higher number of commuters, obviously because of that 1.5 million people who are going back to work today. And we know that from the previous weeks, there were a lot less taxis on circulation because taxi owners found that because of the regulations, they weren't able to make so much money. So a lot of them opted to keep their taxis at home. And there might be some adjustment that is needed to ensure that there's a lot more taxis that are on the road to serve the 1.5 million commuters or 1.5 million workers that are going back to work, Ayanda.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like an environment that's, way more busier than it used to be about 5 weeks ago. I mean, give us an idea, if you've managed to speak to any of the commuters, what some of their concerns are, as a whole lot more of them, of course, might potentially even expose themselves to COVID-19 whilst trying to make their way back home, to work.
Certainly, that's one of the things that we'll be giving our viewers on the next crossing, on the next bulletin, to allow them to hear the concerns and the opinions and views of the commuters who are currently here. There's certainly a lot more of them, but we will be hearing from them in the next coming crossings. There were a couple of them that we had lined up, but they had to rush to work because, as you can imagine, everyone is rushing at this time of the morning. But we will be speaking to them a little later on, Ayanda.
All right, and we'll make sure to touch base with you once that opportunity presents itself. Itikani Magwete is our reporter live to us from the Breed Taxi Rank. Thanks very much indeed. Let's bring you back to our studios here in Linden, Johannesburg, to give you an idea of some of the headlines in the major newspapers this morning, as of course the COVID-19 story continues developing legs in all kinds of aspects. Throughout the papers we've got today, they all have very different leads around the very same story, which is quite telling. I'll kick us off with the Citizen, if I can. They're speaking about, the price we have to pay for COVID-19, alluding to the idea that, for many, many businesses, especially those that are still starting out, the regulations in their current form are so stringent and so demanding that it almost appears as though the medication is doing more harm than good to the patient. A lot of those sentiments are being ventilated. That, for instance, there needs to be a whole lot of social distancing. There needs to be PPE that's in place. There needs to be, some ways of sanitization, being able to test and screen potentially. And a lot of experts are pointing out that this will potentially, cripple the already ailing fiscal status of many of these businesses, and in some instances not make it even worth it for them to open, given the regulations of their current form. We know some restaurants, for instance, didn't take up the opportunity to start trading from as early as Friday.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult for many businesses, but also I think it's also an opportunity for people to reevaluate how you do business. And I think those businesses, like the restaurants who decided not to open, gave us a sense of, everyone was excited that you'd be able to make an order and get a delivery, but we weren't really into how these businesses are affected and how this is not going to be viable for those businesses. You look at big brands like your Spurs and your Ocean Baskets who decided not to do the delivery thing. And one would have imagined that, they'd be able to. So it goes to show that not only, if those, what we consider people who have big businesses, are not able to do that, what about those small businesses?
Yeah.
So, it is a story to watch and keep tabs on. If I look at the Star newspaper, this is one of the stories that has had a lot of legs since last week, but also over the weekend, a lot of commentary on Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and the cigarette issue, the ban.
Yeah.
And what the Star is leading with, it's saying Cyril backs Nkosazana in cigarette ban war. She has until 10 o'clock today, according to the tobacco industry, to reverse that decision. And we will see whether that happens, and if she doesn't, what will happen? What will the tobacco industry do? They're lamenting how much loss they've incurred over the 5 weeks, and how they were preparing to at least, give the industry some boost. And some are saying that the minister made the decision unilaterally. The presidency is saying no. This is a decision of the Command Council, of which the President of the Republic is ahead.
Right.
So one would imagine that he would have given an okay and a go-ahead. So that's one of the big stories in the Star newspaper. And we'll see later on today, Ayanda, whether or not, they come to head, the minister and BAT.
What I found most interesting throughout the weekend was the different voices that started coming to the fore. And you kind of get an idea of the semblance of politics that's, coming throughout the commentary. So the ANC Women's League, for instance, coming out with a very strong worded statement over the weekend, essentially slamming as racist bile some of the backlash that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma had received, because a lot of people had suggested that she had tried to thwart the powers of the president, as you rightly mentioned, by doing a sort of about turn on this very issue, which segues quite well into a cartoon in the Business Day this morning, which I think really captures well the sentiment around the back and forth around this particular issue. And perhaps it's worth us taking a step back to evaluate Nkosazana Dlamini's role, insofar as, the things she's had to say throughout her political career around this particular issue. So when she was health minister a few years ago, we had known her to not necessarily take kindly, for lack of a better term, to the idea of having smoking taking place in an unregulated manner in the country. And so the idea today in the cartoon, if we're able to get it up, is that she is essentially using the crisis that is COVID-19 to try and reach the objectives she had been working towards. Then, you know what I mean? So that's the backdrop. That's the kind of the environment in which all of this is playing out. And I don't know if it's sheer coincidence that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is the one who's making the announcement on these particular regulations, but at least the optics of it appears as though this is what she's trying to do. And, there's going to be a back and forth, like you rightly said, for some time. And we'll be able to see how this all pans out. But on the front page of the Business Day, they're referring to a statement that comes from the Deputy Finance Minister, that's David Masondo, about the ways through which the Reserve Bank should try to provide some kind of relief during COVID-19, and it has to do with the purchasing of bonds. So it's quite a technical type idea to try and understand. But what we know so far is that the Reserve Bank has tried to provide relief by buying bonds on the secondary market. This essentially means they're not providing direct funding to government, and part of the reason they're not doing that is because that strategy had been taken in other countries, including Venezuela and Zimbabwe, and it led to hyperinflation. So the Deputy Finance Minister is suggesting that the Reserve Bank should do something that didn't necessarily work out in other countries, and that's what the article is about. He's since gone on to clarify, but also emphasize the importance of the independence of the Reserve Bank itself. It's an interesting story. I mean, we know that the role of the Reserve Bank has also been a political issue for quite some time in the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be telling how the Reserve Bank and Treasury balance there. Let's quickly look at the Sowetan. It's one of the remember when it all started, I said, masks are going to be our fashion statement. And this is what is happening now, is that we are having...
Nation. Wow.
Listen, we are finding, but we're finding that what the story in the Sowetan is actually saying is that there's a market out there in the township. People are making masks, selling masks, and making a living out of them. So I think while we are mzegezegging, we're also making money, and we're also protecting ourselves, and we're creating the township economy that government is talking about. So it's an interesting story.
Absolutely. And we'll kind of have to see how it also pans out. For those who aren't necessarily aware, Mzegazege used to be like, it's a hip-hop artist.
Is it a
Kwaito artist? There you go.
That's it.
Kwaito artist in the country who was very well known for covering his face